We're Kevin and Laura Hatch. We're owners of H&H Fabrication. I first recognized that there was something up with my health when I went to the dentist to get a normal teeth cleaning. They told me my blood pressure was too high to even touch me. So they said, you need to go to urgent care immediately. And up until that point, I was healthy, so I thought, felt fine, no issues. They took my blood pressure, put me on some medication, and said, you need to go to a heart doctor. So I went to a cardiologist and went through the whole 9 yards. Stress test, everything, passed all of the tests, EKG, everything was, looking normal, and they were like, well, we don't know what's wrong with you. A couple months later, I guess, is whenever we started having some more issues. They had put me on some blood pressure medication. A couple months later, just was feeling bad, running out of energy, I don't know, thought that I was just working too much, too hard, whatever. So then all of a sudden, one evening after work, had this episode where I just blacked out, passed out in our bathroom, fell flat on my back. I went to the cardiologist, got checked out. He said, they did another EKG. Well, everything looks normal. What was it, a week or two later?
A week later. 1 week later.
It happened again. Oddly enough, passed out in the bathroom, hard floor, flat on my back. And that time, they got me up, took me to the bedroom, put me on the bed, and then I kept passing out. They loaded me up and took me to the emergency room.
He passed out in the emergency room, and they brought in the crash cart and about 10 people, and they were like, this guy's going out. And so he came back to like he had been doing, and so they were really confused as to like what was wrong.
When they did the CT scan, they at that point saw that I had a very large tumor right in the middle of my chest cavity, and we had no knowledge of that before. As the blood pressure medication was lowering my blood pressure, my heart couldn't overcome the pressure of the fluid around the heart. First thing the next morning, they took me into surgery to drain that fluid. And what did they say? They removed like 3 pounds of fluid from around my heart. And then during that same surgery, they did a biopsy of that tumor. Found out a few hours later that it was cancerous tumor. So in the hospital, we could see the construction site of the Harrington Cancer Survivorship Center, which we had just fabricated. We didn't really even know. We knew that it was related to Harrington Cancer Center. We didn't know that it was called the Survivorship Center.
We didn't really know what it was. We just knew that they had built it
as
part of the Harrington.
It wasn't really until later on that we found out what it actually was and what they do there, and that it was a cancer survivorship center,
Right.
And that, it was almost a refuge for cancer survivors, to be able to go and have all these resources that they have there. They scheduled us a PET scan where they scan you from basically your knees to the top of your head, and see where the cancer is. And, they're showing the image on the computer screen, and it was just...
It was a huge dark spot in the center of his heart, like in the center of his core. And it was just, it was a very strange picture to look at if you think of things in a spiritual way, that this tumor was kind of in his center. And the way it looked on the PET scan, it was just it was a dark presence in his body.
They determined what type of cancer it was. They said it was a B-cell lymphoma.
The chemo treatment was for Kevin to wear a chemo pump for a week.
It was, from what I understand, just based on the oncologist and the way he described it, was a very aggressive chemo treatment, and it was to increase 20% every cycle. The first round of chemo wasn't that bad.
It was more emotional than...
probably more emotional than physical. Made me, feel crummy a little bit, but...
And they would get, at the end of it, you would get the shot that happened, was it 24 hours after you got the chemo?
Yeah, that was a injection to boost your white blood count. And that was one of the worst things about the whole thing was having that at the end of each cycle. It would really make you feel pretty crummy for a few days. It would make your bones hurt, especially like all of the large bones in your body. I mean, it was just like a deep, it was like the aches that you get when you have the flu, but deeper. So we did 5 months worth of chemo treatments. By the end, with the 20% increase every time, it was 120% stronger the last go around, and it was, I didn't know if I could go anymore. Really, it was wearing me down pretty bad. Halfway through the chemo, we had a PET scan, and it had decreased significantly in just half of the chemo treatment. We went in after the last chemo treatment, had a PET scan, and the tumor was gone.
It was like 2 centimeters. It was barely there.
Yeah, and he said that he thought that it was probably just scar tissue remaining.
He had a PET scan in August, and that PET scan, the result was that it was completely gone. There's nothing left.
The official word on the report said resolved, all capital letters. So about the time that I was finishing up with my chemo is when we bid the Panhandle Cancer Care job. And I don't feel like that it's of any coincidence that we've now been related with 2 cancer centers, a cancer survivorship center and a cancer treatment facility, in the midst of me living through my personal journey. At the completion of steel erection for Panhandle Cancer Care Center, we got invited out to a ceremony that they had where they hung the last piece of steel. Well, everybody that came got to sign the last beam, and they told everybody, you can write whatever you want, whether it's a poem or a prayer or a thought. I put my name on it and just put a declaration, if you will, just basically speak healing over your people in the name of Jesus.
Whenever we were in the hospital and we found out that Kevin had a tumor, the Lord told me that it would be resolved by his next birthday. The specific word was resolved. And then whenever he got his last PET scan results, and in writing they put that the issue was resolved, it was definitely a confirmation. I think we don't really feel like Kevin beat cancer.
No.
We feel like the Lord removed his cancer.
Yeah, absolutely.